All right, we've got another great question to answer this week, and that is going to be how to start your journey with running. So we're going to be talking pretty in depth about this one today so that you've got a plan that you could implement and things that you can start doing today or tomorrow to start your journey with running. So we're going to be talking about things such as the benefits of it, as well as how hard your workout should be when it comes to running. We're also going to be talking about things such as how long you should be doing it for and how many times a week. And we're also going to give you kind of some tips and tricks for different things to make your journey a little bit easier. So let's get into it. All right, so let's get into the benefits of getting involved with running. So the most obvious benefit, which we've all kind of heard about or have used ourselves, is to manage your weight, right? So you're going to be burning more calories, which over time can lead to weight loss. But there are other benefits that we don't always talk about. So the first one I want to talk about is you're going to build a stronger, healthier heart. So we are on this planet for a very, very long time. And by building a stronger, healthier heart, you're going to decrease your chances for all sorts of diseases down the road. So that is a very, very strong benefit right there. Another benefit you're going to get is you're going to start to build your lower body endurance. So what does this mean? It means that think of a staircase. So you're thinking of a couple of flights of stairs and two different people. So one of those people go up that couple of flights of stairs, and by the end of it, they're drenched in sweat. Their heart's beating and they're breathing super heavily, right? But you also know somebody who goes up those same flights of stairs and doesn't even break a sweat. So that person who doesn't even break a sweat has a higher amount of lower body endurance and cardiovascular ability. So that's one of the great things that happens when we get involved with running is you start to build your cardiovascular ability so that you can go further with a less amount of effort involved. So those are a couple of the benefits that we see that we don't always talk about. All right, so as mentioned, I want to make sure that I'm giving you the knowledge and the tips that you need in order to implement a strategy for your training today so you can get started, get moving, and start seeing the results that you want, right? So let's talk about the different types of training zones and which zone you should be in while you're training for running, all right? So the first zone is the aerobic zone, all right? So the aerobic zone is basically the zone where your body is able to deliver the amount of oxygen to the muscles that they need to sustain that exercise for an extended period of time. So how do you know if you're in this zone? So typically on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being very, very easy, 10 being very, very, very hard, you want to be at about a 3 to 4, all right? In terms of another test I like to use, it's called the talk test, all right? If you're in this zone, you're able to piece sentences together, maintain a conversation. The second zone I want to talk about is the anaerobic zone, and this is the zone where you're not able to deliver enough oxygen to your muscles that they need, which means that you're not able to sustain this for an extended period of time. These are short activities. These are things like sprints, very, very hard rows, or rowing, I should say, and things like that. All right. And in terms of the talk test, you'd be able to, say a word or two, but not really much more than that. Now, the third zone is in between the two, and we're going to call this one the threshold zone. All right. Now, for simplicity, we're going to call it the threshold zone, and this is the period in between the two. All right. So how do you know if you're in this zone? Typically, out of a 1 to 10, you're kind of at probably about a 5 to 6 area there, and you're able to piece multiple words together, a very short sentence, things like that. And that's how you would know that you're in that zone. When you're doing your training for cardio and for when you're trying to increase your running capacity and be able to run longer and further and get that endurance that we've talked about, you want to be in the aerobic zone. So you want to be able to put conversations together, put sentences together, and you want to be at about a 3 to 4 for effort, all right? Again, we're looking at an extended period of time rather than a short, 15-second sprint. So that's why we want to be in that zone. All right, so now we know how hard we should be training. So now let's talk about how long you should be training as well as how many times per week, all right? So when you're first starting out with running, I typically recommend between 10 to 15 minutes for your first run or jog. This is a very, very great time because you can start to kind of get some of those adaptations, but you don't feel overwhelmed and kind of intimidated by the process. Again, when you start training for running, you're going to be very surprised on how quickly you actually improve. So there's a system that I've actually implemented for my own training, as well as with some of the people who have reached out for tips and tricks, and this has been an absolute game changer for me. So it's using a timer called a Tabata Timer. You've probably heard me talk about it in the past, and that's just because I can't kind of comment on how much of a game changer this has been for me. Basically, a Tabata Timer, you download the app on your phone. This is what the logo looks like, so you can download the same one. It is a little bit of a learning curve on how to use it, but once you've got that down pat, it's very, very easy to use. And basically what I like to do is, in this Tabata timer, you can set your work periods, which is where you're going to be doing your running, and your rest periods, okay? Which is, again, where you're doing a brisk walk, still moving, that sort of thing. When you're first starting out, it can be very intimidating knowing that you've got to go out and run for 15 or 20 minutes or whatever it is. And it can be very, very difficult, especially a first time out. So I recommend breaking it up into work periods and rest periods, which you can do in this app. And typically starting out, go for a work period about 45 seconds with an equal rest period. So again, a 45-second rest. This means that you would run for 45 seconds, rest for 45 seconds, right? Now, this doesn't sound like a lot, but you're going to repeat this for about 10 to 12 times. And again, as you improve, which you will very quickly, that's when we can start really making the progress, which would include, first off, my very first progression I like to do is increase the number of times you're repeating it. So instead of 10 times, do it 12. Instead of 12, do it, 14, 15, right? So gradually increasing that number. So again, so you're putting that heart in a position where it's working a little bit harder and getting the cardiovascular system involved for a longer duration during that run. The second progression I like to do is increase your work time. So instead of doing a 45-second run, now do a minute, work up to a minute and a half, right? That sort of thing. And same thing, gradually increasing that up. Now, the third progression I like to do is decrease the amount of rest period. And again, now you're going to kind of transition into working even a little bit more cardio in a more efficient way because you're not getting those rest periods quite as much. But same thing. The big thing with this one is, rather than it being kind of a physical tip, it's more of a psychological tip more than anything else. The reason for this being, again, when you know that you've got to go out and run 15, 20 minutes, when you're in that 5-minute mark, you can be like, oh man, I've still got another 10, 15 minutes to go. Like, oh, like this sucks, Whereas when you break it up, then all you have to do is, oh, I only have to do 60 seconds. Oh, I only have to do a minute and a half. And when you decrease that rest period to, eventually you'll get to the point where it's 10, 15 seconds, you're really not decreasing your heart rate too much during that 10, 15 seconds. You're still getting that same cardiovascular effect. The only difference is now it's much more attainable and it feels very much more achievable rather than looking at a goal as one big thing. You're breaking it up into smaller chunks, which for a lot of people can be a game changer, very, very helpful. And this is what I do with all my training. At this point, I'm at about 3 minutes of jogging, and then I'll walk for 15, 20 seconds, right? Again, for me, that's just that psychological hack more than anything else, which really, really helps out. We just talked about how long your sessions should be. Now let's talk a little bit more about how often per week. All right, so if you're new to running, I recommend starting out with 2 to 3 sessions per week. Not on consecutive days. Give yourself a day or two rest, and then doing your next session, right? So after about probably about a month or two, you can probably up that up to 3 to 4 times a week, and that should be sufficient for starting to build your cardiovascular ability. All right, so that's my little kind of how-to guide on getting started with running. I've really been enjoying answering these questions. I'm trying to help give you guys the knowledge and the education on topics that might confuse you. So please, send me a message. I'm very, very open to covering all sorts of different topics related to fitness and nutrition. So send a message, and then I can start on the next video. So thanks for watching. Share this video to anybody that you think it might be helpful to. And yeah, looking forward to keeping this going.